way to put an external display on this thing. There is even, a different version of this called the ColorSource AB. It has an HDMI port on the back, but it's not for having a separate display. It's because it has other functions, like you could play video off of this into a projector or whatever. But that's not what you have here, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, no bigger display, unfortunately.
Yeah, I can actually see over it.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I have problems with. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, old eyes though.
Yep. How about before we record? So just to get a baseline, so out of all the people here, how many of you are like familiar with any lighting console? It doesn't have to be this one.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so most of you. Okay. Just trying to see here. Okay, so there's a few different places we can start with, but I guess let's start with the physical aspect of it. So on the back, you have a USB port, which is going to be useful for when you want to save a show externally, although it can be saved internally. As many of you might know, though, you always want to save it two places, because when this thing goes up in flames, your show doesn't also go up in flames.
So a thumb drive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And on the back, it's just the thumb drive, the power, and the DMX. That's all you've got. Maybe a Kensington lock, too. Yeah. If you want to lock it up, you can. So then moving on to the front here, obviously we got 40 different faders here, and then an extra set of 4. So these 40 faders can have two main functions. Right now we are in channel mode, so just, it's however you patch it, but 1 is 1 and 2 is 2. And it also has playback mode. Right now it looks like there's only one thing saved on there. And well, we'll make some, but
So playback would be a look.
it's more like a submaster
look.
if you guys are used to that on
Yeah.
other boards.
Got it.
Yes, a look. Yep, exactly. Oh, well, actually, it might have something, because moving on to these faders, these are kind of, well, not all of them, but the first 3 of them you can think of as masters, and they're masters for what they are right above. So this one's a master for the bumps. This one's a master for the playbacks, which was off. So now we do actually have something coming up on that. And the third one is the master for the cues. And you can see those, and if there's anything trying to output, then on the playbacks, or let's see, I guess not the bumps, but the playbacks and the cues, if there's anything actively trying to output, it will light up, as you can see, yellow here and purple for the playbacks. Well, okay, it'll light up if it's up at all a little bit. The last one, it says crossfader right beneath it, and that's for literally just crossfading manually. So you can write a bunch of cues, and they can have their own timing, just like you can on many other boards that you've probably seen. But if you want to do it a manual fade, then this is what you're going to use. And you can actually see it kind of happening in the little corner here. You can see the current cue that you're on and the next cue that you're going to. And as I've started moving it, there's little like progress bars, vertical progress bars, if you will, from the fade out of one cue and the fade into the next cue. And then once you go all the way to the top, okay, now I'm in cue 0.4, called pre-show. And then the thing that might be a little bit confusing, it does the same thing in both directions. And what I mean by that is I used it, I went up with it in order to do the crossfade, but going down with it does not go backwards, it just crossfades into the next cue. So when I do this, I'm crossfading into cue 0.5 from 0.4.
So it's different than when in some of the older ETC boards, when you could set up something with, so let's say X and Y, and you're basically going between the two.
Right.
It's going
they kind
through
of shove that all
pre-recorded looks
into one.
and you're just going back and forth and toggling from pre-recorded
Yes.
cues.
Yeah, you
one
can't do
to
an
the next.
XY like you're talking about, like set all these up and all of
Yeah,
these
you
up.
remember those in the expression and
Yes.
things like that.
Yeah, you cannot do that on this
completely
board.
different. That's why I think we're confused, is that we're used, I can speak for myself, we're kind of used to some of the old style formats, and this really is speaking kind of a different language even than EOS TI
yes.
or an expression
Yeah.
or some earlier ETC boards.
And the main reason for that is that, no offense to anybody here, but they tried to dumb it down. to be more accessible to a lot more people. So if you shove the TI in front of somebody, they'd be like, their brain would extra explode, you know, if they've never touched a board before. These are great for people.
I'll let you know if they've dumbed it down enough.
Me too.
So yeah, right now, I'm just gonna keep on going through the cue list. I'm not going backwards through cues, I'm just going forward. Every time I move it from one extreme to the other, it's going to the next cue.
Got it.
And some of those cues may be blackouts, for instance.
Yeah, it's whatever the people
Yeah.
programmed in last time.
Is there a Grandmaster blackout button?
No, there's no blackout button and there's no Grandmaster. The closest thing to a Grandmaster is these guys right here, but it's segmented into the 3 different sections.
Gotcha.
Paul, is that the only manual way that you go from cue to cue?
Well,
Cue to the next?
well, there's a halfway manual way because this is more about manual timing than anything else.
Ah.
Where you can still, you know, you got go buttons
Press the
down
button
here.
and go to the next cue, just like in
Yeah.
on the old boards.
Yes.
Yeah.
So now I'm using down here, we've got a go back button, a pause button, and a play button, which is the play button is a go button on a lot of boards.
Gotcha.
That just uses the timing that has been recorded. So you don't have any, if you're pressing that button, I can press the pause button, you know, if I took the cue too early, like so many people do. So, oh man, press the
Yeah, I've
pause.
done that.
And then, you know, right now, we're in between. It even says it right up here. We're in between 2 cues, and right now I could either go back, and now we're back in that cue that we just were in, or I have it paused again, and then you can press the play button to continue your fade. If you're like, okay, well now we actually get to the part where I'm supposed to press that play button. So yeah, play or go, same thing. A thing as a whole for this screen is that these buttons on the bottom pretty much always, if not entirely always, correspond to these, we'll call them soft keys. So the row that's right at the bottom of the screen here. And this is a touch screen, so you can choose, you can press the play button on the screen, or you can press the play button using the physical key. I find it's easier personally just to hit a physical button instead of trying to sometimes miss, you know, who knows, fat finger.
It's a tiny screen, so. Yeah.
It is, yes. So it's a good thing that they put some,
How do you change the soft keys?
you don't.
Okay,
Yeah.
they're always that,
They're-
so they're not really soft.
They're always something because it's changing depending on what situation you're in.
Okay, all right.
So currently, when we're just looking at the regular channel map here, that's why it's in this mode. But if we go over to, let's say, select some things here. Well, I'll show you. I'll show you
Yeah,
as
I
we go
gotcha,
on.
yeah.
It'll change, I promise.
Gotcha.
Okay, so then moving on to, I guess, navigation. So you just saw me kind of drag my finger across. So that's one way you can select cues. Or not cues, sorry, channels. Channels on this screen. So, you know, that's the whole thing to start making a look. You want to select whatever channels you're looking to use. And you can do that a couple different ways. You can do it like I just did. You can hunt and peck, you know, just to select a certain one. You can also, if you go back over to the channels, and I'll get back to the difference in there. But if you come over to the channels layout and you click on one of them, it'll light up. You see a lot brighter than it was, and that means it's selected. And at the same time, you can see number 16. When I click it on there, it puts the little green box around whatever channel you're trying to do. So that also, anytime you start using a fader, it will just automatically select it because the way this board kind of works is it needs to be selected in order to make changes. So they figured, well, when somebody pushes a fader, I'm sure they're trying to use that channel.
Right.
Makes sense, right? The last way to select it that you guys might be more familiar with is there's a keypad of sorts. So if I go over to controls, there's a button that says keypad, and now I can do 1 through 10 at full.
Now that's dumb enough. That's that I
That's
can
like a
relate
light
to.
palette. I like that.
That's
Uh-huh.
like the old board, which, you know, being an old person,
Yeah.
And obviously, at full is not the, you know, it's your typical lighting
yeah.
keypad here. So I could do at 70. And I just changed them because I still had those selected because I didn't unselect them at all. All right, so I'll go back to, this is kind of more of the default view, this channel map, although, you know, QList can sometimes be useful too. Depends what kind of show you're doing. The QList will just kind of shrink the channel map, and although you can manually kind of adjust it down and get just a full QList if you wanted to instead. But I'll bring it back to about half there. And then I'll actually press this button again, it'll just get rid of the QList. There's a button on the bottom right now, a soft key, that says QList. All right, let's go back to over here. I kind of quickly alluded to, we've got a blue button that's right now selected, channel 1 through 40, and right below it is playback 1. So, like I started out this conversation, channel 1 through 40 is just a one-to-one. Oh, yeah, I already went over this, didn't I? Yeah, the playback is playbacks, which we'll get into making. Let's see what's next. There's so many things to go over, you know, but how about this? Well, if you have, I'm going to go back to channel 1. You can see we got all these bright ones here, so we know that these ones I have selected 1 through 9. You can, you know, just use your same tricks to select and deselect stuff. But if you have a bunch of stuff scattered everywhere and you don't want to go through the process of like, all right, deselect this, deselect that, deselect that, there's a clear button down at the bottom here. It's right above the play button. It's in red. If you press that, it'll pop up with a couple different options. So there's all, playbacks, cues, channels, and selection. So, you know, I typically just tend to use the all, but you can kind of determine what you're trying to do. So if I don't want to turn these lights off, but I want to deselect them, if I clear the selection, you can see the lights are still on, but all the lights dimmed off on the board here. So I'll turn them back on. Clearing cues, I think that would go back to, I think that'd be like go to cue 0 essentially.
Okay, it doesn't delete your cues.
No.
Okay.
No. Yeah, playbacks too. Well, let's see. If we turned on, here we go. I'm going to turn everything off, which I did too quickly. I pressed the clear button and then the all, and you can see that just kind of blank slate, which I like best personally. But I'm going to go back over to my playbacks here. I'm going to turn on this view, and let's see what happens when we clear playbacks. Yep. So it just turned this one off.
So that the screen will override the slider.
Yes, but also, you know, this way on a lot of boards too. It's kind of a latest takes precedence situation with the faders themselves. So, you know, it's at the top right now, but if I bring it back down and bring it back up, now I've got control again. And same thing, you know, if we were to go to channel, you know, into the channel mode, and we have a couple of these channels up. I go to playback mode. I pull these faders down. So the channel stayed up because, you know, it's not
In the right mode.
it's not in the right mode. But when I go back to channel, they're still on. Now, I'm only going to take control of them once I get past that level that I had them at, which is the case on a lot of boards. So now I can see I got, you know, and now it's just on and off for that one. And same thing, if I brought it up and down, now I've got control of that. Any questions so far?
Not that I can articulate.
Yeah, it's possible that starting from scratch in terms of basically a blank slate and saying, how do I patch one line set with electric?
We
for
could do that.
instance, and, you know, is there a group option for, you know, you're doing a show and you go, I want to go to group 1, which happens to be the front pars, or whatever. I mean, I think
Sure.
it might be helpful to know
Okay, well then let's,
how someone might set something up for a show.
Yeah.
Front wash, sides, backlight, et cetera.
Let's look at the patch here.
And then
So,
create cues from these various groups, for instance.
so to go to the patch, there's a little gear at the bottom left corner here. It says Setup. I'm going to click on that, and one of the options here is, well, I'll just read them out. So there's Patch, Settings, Files, and Layout Mode. So Patch is Patch, which we'll get right into. Settings is kind of setting some stuff behind the scenes that you don't usually use. So maybe on a per show basis or something like that. And Files is where you would do your file operations, saving, exporting, importing, that kind of stuff. And the layout mode, I forget, what does that do? Oh yeah, so that's the mode where you can rearrange where all these are in your little,
Oh, what are?
all of your channels. You can rearrange
Oh,
them.
you just group them by dragging them?
Well, that's not so much the grouping part.
Okay.
That's just the arrangement of how you want to see them
It's a
Okay.
on this
visual-
screen.
Visual thing.
Yeah. And that's just kind of a one-time setup thing. Once you have your show set up and arranged how you want, I wouldn't see anybody changing these on the fly.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So I'll just exit that. I'm going to go to patch here. So we're kind of seeing two different sides here. So one, it's kind of a list format and that you can scroll through. And then on the bottom is kind of a re-representation of that little channel map that we have in the default. And you can still do the same thing. So, selecting lights here, and if I want to just jump over to number 38 and change the patch on that, you can just select that and yada yada. But you can see at the top here, we have our ColorSource pars. We've got them all in a line, it seems. But we will just, maybe I'll delete them and I'll add them back in.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention that Opto is not RDM compatible, just so you know.
Right, yes. So I'm not going to
Should
be...
probably do that at some point, but it's not right now.
Yeah, I mean, with ceilings as low as you have, it's not a terrible
No,
time to
no.
get on a ladder. But obviously, if it can be easier, it's always nice.
You haven't seen that
RDM is
letter.
remote data management, and then you can change the format of the lamp from the instrument rather than going up there and pressing up and down.
Yeah.
So
If you got
it's
a new
helpful,
show.
but you need a particular piece of gear like that Opto that is RDM compatible. That one is not, just so you know.
Yes, so I'll start with, I'm going to delete, so how about I'll just delete like 3 of them or something like that, not all of them. So just to make sure we have them, so our DMX is starting at 101. Okay, so I'm going to delete, there's a remove button on the bottom here, and it just did that. I think this is a one-by-one thing.
The conventionals are sort of through, let's say, dimmer, let's just, I can't remember, but let's say 50. And so the 101 was the idea of trying to keep straight which were the conventionals. Which
Oh,
were
yeah.
1 through whatever.
Yes, you're right. I think that is the case.
101 through whatever are the channels that are devoted to the LED instruments. That was the initial concept of trying to keep in mind, who are we talking to? The conventionals, which only need 1, and then you're running an actual dimmer versus the different attributes of the LED instruments. So,
Okay,
Yep.
yeah,
that's what I do too.
yeah.
And so speaking of which, we got 2 different options of how to add something to this patch here. So we've got add dimmer and we've got add device. Add dimmer is just what it sounds like, and it's only going to be 1 channel, and there's not a bunch of options, but it'll have a lot of the same kind of options we'll see in add device. Add device is for like anything that's smarter, more than 1 channel, basically. So when I pressed that button, it said add device, and we're in this screen now. This is the patch wizard, as they call it. So you can either look for, you got to know what kind of light we're talking about, and ideally it's not some cheap grade Chinesium, but luckily they're not. We got some nice ETC source 4 pars here, so you can either search for it in a little search bar, or you can scroll through the manufacturer list. Is the way that they would have you start. And it's got a big list because they try to be thorough. So in this case, I found ETC, and they're just going to start listing all their items here. And we know that we have, are they deep blue or are they not?
Uh-oh.
I can check on the other ones, it's
I
fine.
don't recall, damn it.
Well, then let me just look. Yeah, deep blue,
Okay.
which just for everybody is like a variant of the device itself that has more of a blue LED to make it more theatrical, honestly. It's the right one for this kind of space. So luckily I remembered that I was already in ETC. Click that guy, and then we're looking for ColorSource, and they abbreviate the source SRC. So it's a little bit hard to search for if you don't remember that little part of it. ColorSource PAR, deep blue, select that guy. And then the third column here, mode, 5-channel. And at the top here, this is where it gets easier to patch multiple devices at once. So I want to start it, all these are the starts. Well, not all of them, but we got channel, and I want to start it at channel 1, which is different, obviously, than our DMX address.
For 101.
It's different.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what, we have a DMX column over here.
Okay.
So I'm going to,
Okay.
it auto-populated with like the next open one, starting from 1, but we're going to put in 101, and we are in universe 1, I believe.
Yeah, there's only one.
That's true. That's a good
running
point.
to not the-
And then the second column here, count. How many of these do you want to put on there? And it'll auto space them out, auto set. Okay, the second one should be starting at 106. The third one should be starting at 111. So I'm going to type in the number 3. And the spacing, it auto-populated it because it knows how many channels this profile takes up. So it's auto set to 5. And I'm going to press, that's just the green check mark for this little count thing, because it pops up with a little keypad. But now I'm just going to press the green check mark here. And, okay, good.
They're all different colors.
They are. So we can see,
We're not gonna have to do this much.
what we can see here is we've got some red in this column here. And red means conflicting DMX addresses. It's interesting because looking at these, they are set, the ones that existed before we were touching anything here, they're just set to three channels, which must be like RGB. Oh, it's RGB mode. Okay. I personally don't think that's the best mode to do it in, but right now, like
But
you said, we don't have
essentially they
RDM.
are. So,
We're not going to be able to get up there and change it manually.
well, we could, but it would take time.
Yes. So for today, I'm gonna redo those guys. So I'm gonna.
So we're not gonna be controlling all that we could be because we haven't saved enough channels for them, right?
Kind of, yeah.
We're running it in a mode that doesn't use all the options.
Yeah, I mean, it's more or less, yes,
Okay.
correct. So,
Yeah, we're not gobbling up as much channels, which we don't really have a problem with the lack of channels. It's really just whatever we want it to be. So
Mhm.
if we want the default in the future to be, deep blue or whatever the 5
The 5
channel
channel, yeah.
per unit is, times 18 instruments, that shouldn't be a problem.
No.
Because we have 512 minus the 100, so we have 412 to play with. And then the first 100 are devoted to the conventionals at the present time.
Yeah, yeah. If you guys want to change, I mean, if the RGB mode works for you, more power to you.
Right.
So I'm going to change these guys. So let me go back for a sec. In order to change them, it's actually not that bad, even though they already exist here. So I just selected the guy, and if there's, in general, if you want to change anything about it, like in the future, you decide, okay, I'm going to change the DMX address on this certain light. You select the light that you're trying to do, and then there's little boxes above this whole list here. And if you just click on one of those boxes, you can change the attribute about it. So, the universe or the DMX. So I'm going to click on, which is the name of it, but it's also the mode in this case. So I still have it all selected, but we're going to change it over to RGB. And check. And I'm going to change it on these two, and then we'll fix the DMX addresses. Actually, we can just do it as we go. So click on that guy, change it to RGB. And then in this case, I'm going to change it to 104, I believe. And then we're going to select the third one here, change it to RGB. And let's see, we want 107, looks like. Whoops, too many numbers.
Yep.
Okay, no more red, so no more conflicting addresses, which is good. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger here. One thing that you guys might find easy, which I think you were kind of alluding to here, is there's a different way of grouping than you would do on maybe some of the other consoles that some people have used. You can't really say all these lights are going to be my group 1. It doesn't work exactly that way. The way they kind of do it is while we're in patch here, we have things, these last 2 columns that currently don't have anything anywhere, and they say tag 1 and tag 2. So if I click on that, you get a few different options here, and you can actually customize what these say in the settings of the board, but by default, you got nothing, psych, fill, spot, wash, flood, key, and beam. So for right now, let's just say it's a fill. Okay, yeah. And then, and there are 2 tag columns, so you can, make it.
A fill and a special.
Yeah, exactly. Fill and something else if you got. So once again, it is a little bit more limited. You can't, one channel cannot be in 7 different groups. You got 2 groups basically at max for one particular channel. But I'll just put a third one in here. I'll make it a fill. And I'm trying to remember. Oh yeah, that's just going to add another one, so we don't want to do that.
Just do the 2.
I forget if the color is easy to change here or no. We'll get to that at a different point here. But I'm going to go back. I'm going to come out of patch here. So easiest way to get back to in general is you'll see a little grid is one of the soft keys. It's almost always one of the soft keys. So I'm just going to press that. And that's kind of back to our place here. If I go over to controls, and there's a button called quick selects, tap on that. There's a couple different things that we're looking at here. You can see there's some of these options are green, and some of them are just not green, black. And green means that there's a light in this category. Yes, correct. Thank you. So if I press the fill, now you can see it selected 1, 2, and 3 because that's what those 3 I told them that they are fill lights.
Okay.
This other section that we're seeing right here is kind of I don't know how useful it'll be. I've never used it myself, but to be fair, I don't use these on a regular basis. It's a representation of your channel map. And so, if you want to say, oh, maybe all the lights that are on the side here. So it's selected, if we make that a little bit bigger, it's selected the 2 that are in the center. I don't know how much this is making sense, but it selected the 2 that are in the center. And let me just clear the selection here. And if we press, I press the arrow that is in 1 and
So
in the center.
It's like a magic sheet.
It's kind of like it just selects, this is a grid, and it selects all the lights that it thinks are in that part of the grid
Okay.
based on this little thing. It doesn't strike me as the most
No.
friendly as far as selecting the lights that you actually want to, because you just got to get a bunch of stuff in addition, but maybe depending on the setup, it might be useful.
What if I have, instead of groups, what if I have side light and they're in channels 2 and 4 and 6. And I want them to be sequential. So I want to change them to be 2, 3, 4. Can I change the patch on this board?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. To do that, we would go back to our patch, and then at that point, you know, it's just a question of selecting the light you want. I'm just going to pick one, and then this, you know, this little 3 that's up here is a 3 because I currently have number 3 selected. I would tap on that number 3 successfully, though. There we go. And a little keypad will come up, and then you can change what.
Whatever I want.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And you're not changing its address, you're only changing its channel number. And let me escape that. Red X. Okay. Any questions so far?
Too numerous to mention.
Yeah. Like
Yeah,
I
I
was.
don't think we're going to be doing a lot of, patching LED.
I mean, somebody
LEDs in
is
there.
when a
Yeah.
new show starts.
Okay.
So, but like I was mentioned to a couple people before we started here, you know, if there's, I'm sure there's a lot of this is kind of, your eyes are glazing over because it's a lot of information. So there are a bunch of, it's only like maybe 20 YouTube videos or something like that. And they're all short, you know, 5 minutes or less. And they're just on a certain section, how to patch, how to make a cue, how to do this, how to do that. And they're really easy to follow along. And if you don't have the board in front of you, you can download the offline simulator and put it on your computer, and you can try and just do the same thing that they're doing while you're just watching the YouTube video right here.
And that's all on ETC's website, right?
Yep. You would go to their website, and you know they have a section for consoles. Look for the ColorSource, and then towards the bottom, I think they usually have the downloads. The downloads might have more things than just that. Sometimes they have the manual in there too, but it'll have something called offline something. I don't know exactly what they named it as, but
The thing is, if you were a group that was coming in here to do a show, and we have only, 3 or 4 main groups that might come in, and PTD being probably the principal one that's doing shows here, and then we have drama camps and things like that. But let's say that you wanted to set up a default situation where you could create cues easily from what you see that we have. We have these conventionals where there's likely to be a front wash or whatever, and some specials, and we have these ColorSource LED PARs, which generally speaking I think would be done per pipe anyway, because often I'm just saying, at least how I would use it, I'd generally not be necessarily using them as specials because they're PARs, and using them as a general wash, some kind of a backlight, that kind of stuff. Maybe it's per pipe, that sort of thing. So how would you set up the channels, the faders, so that then you could build cues for your show? Let's say you've got just a traditional box set, and you want to have a wash, you want to have some specials, and you also want to be able to control generally a blue situation from the LEDs for a night scene, that kind of stuff.
well,
What's the best way, in your opinion, to set that up so that everybody comes back to at least something that most people are going to find
sure.
user-friendly?
I think we can get into this next section of playbacks. That might be a good way to do it for this space. So what I'm going to do is we're going to start with, let's see, there's 8 of them per pipe, or how many per pipe?
6. I think there are 18 of them.
Okay,
So I think it's
18?
6 and then 3 pipes.
All right. By the way, one thing we haven't touched on, on the side, on the right side here, there's a thing that says level, and it's a level wheel. It's just a digital level wheel. So instead of, one by one pushing these up, I can select them all like I just did using the little bump buttons down there, and then, and same thing, going down, it just kind of snaps back. And if you have it closer to the center, it goes a lot slower. If you put it all the way down, it goes a lot faster. So if I push it just a little bit up, it's fading, but slowly.
And at some point, you'll come to the color picker too.
Yes.
I assume.
Yep, we're actually going to do that
Great.
right here.
Perfect.
So I'm just going to put them at full, and let's set them to a different color. So to access the color picker, the easiest way to do it, there's one hiding over here in controls. There's this little teardrop looking thing, but easier is there's a soft key right now. So I'm going to click that, and it doesn't look like the color picker yet, but it's kind of there. This is just, even though it's the color picker, but it's also for everything else. So if you had movers in here, that's why we're not seeing the color picker just yet. So we got 5 different tabs here. So one of them is color.
There you go.
Now you'll also notice that on the position, color, and beam tab, there's like a little tick mark underneath it. So in those cases, the position and color have 3 tick marks, and beam has 2. If you click it again, it's a different kind of view of, here, let me just pull this down. It's a different view of color. So right now we're looking at color chips. And if I click it again, this is like the hard data of what they're on right now. So right now in this orangey color, we've got full red, half green, and no blue. So if I click it one more time, color, we're back to that color picker. And, you know, you can just be waving your finger around, pick whatever color you like. So I'm going to go over to the chips here just to have it nice and easy. So I'm going to make them all red. And now what I'm going to do is we're going to getting into record here. So we got a record button right here. It says record/edit. If I click that guy, there's 3 different kinds of things that we can record on this board. Cues, preset, playback memories, and playback sequences. So cues are cues. We'll still get into that, but mostly self-explanatory. Playback memory is more like a submaster, and playback sequence is like a cue list that you put on a submaster. And an example of that would be like, if you got a party scene in your show, and you don't want to necessarily put it in the main cue list, you just want to have like maybe control, and you can decide when it's on or off, and you can decide also the brightness of it. It can just, you know, be a few different steps. You know, the lights are changed from blue, red, green, yellow, and then
So
just
it's like the chaser.
cycle. Yeah, it's exactly a chaser. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So that's what a playback sequence is. But we're going to do a playback memory. When you're recording it, you can do it, you know, either by clicking. There's a playback memory button right here. But the easier way, I think, is just to select whichever one of these you want to use as that playback memory. So it doesn't matter if you're in channel mode or you're in playback mode here, because it knows when you click on it that we're not trying to record that channel, because it's not possible on this board. We're trying to record a playback. So I'm going to put it right here just for something. And it went back to how it kind of was there. But now I'm just going to change it. Let's make it a green. And I'm going to press that record button again. I'm going to put it on 22. And I'll pick a blue here and put it on 23. So now I'm just going to exit that. Now what we can do, in here, I'm going to start from a clear. So we got a blank stage here. If I move over to playbacks, these mix in a certain way, which might be how you could see somebody walking in and kind of using the board right away. So if I put up the first one, they're all at red. But when I add in the second one, it's mixing that red and the green.
Right.
And then same for the third one.
You
So if
get
I take that out,
white, yeah.
and you know, it's kind of a funny thing, because since these 3 are all doing the same channels, whichever one has the highest intensity, that's the intensity of the light, you know, overall. But you're still changing the intensity of blue or.
So really, if you were going to use it, it would probably be more likely that you'd set some of them like that, and you'd say, let's say, here's look 1. You'd take that down, or you'd crossfade it manually on that. If you were doing it manually.
If you were running a show manually?
Mixing them because of the color, you're never sure what green and purple and red are going to be, and that's not necessarily what you want.
Right. This kind of situation would be more for finding the look and the color scheme that you think looks nice, and then recording it
And then
somewhere.
recording it as a cue.
Yes.
Got it.
And I mean, you could set these up as to whatever combination you want, and then take this and record it into a different preset. I mean, that's also possible.
I see, so you could record, let's say your show consists only of half a dozen looks in those.
Mm-hmm.
But they come obviously back and forth, blackouts and so forth. You could use that as a shortcut to recording the cue sheet by just using those and recording the cues,
Right.
if you get my drift.
I think I do. I think
Okay,
you're right.
I'm just trying to wrap my brain around the nomenclature.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, I wanted to ask a question here because
Yes.
I think I understood something and I want to make sure that I'm not mistaken about that.
Okay.
Okay. So you said the intensity of the light is whatever the highest one of these three is when you're mixing them.
Mm-hmm.
But the percent of the mix of the light is controlled by where these are proportionally? Is that right?
So that might have come off a little confusing the way I worded it. So let me try it a different way. We're kind of messing with two different parameters here. We're messing with the overall intensity of it, and we're messing with the color.
Yeah.
So, and when it comes to the overall intensity, if this one's at full, well then the lights are at
The
full
lights are at full,
intensity-wise.
right.
But obviously, technically the intensity changes a little bit based on how many LEDs you do or do not have on. But in general, let me put it this way. So if we zoom in, by the way, pinch and move.
Okay.
If you zoom in far enough, you can actually see the intensities of the lights that you're talking about. So they're all at 0. If this guy's at 50 or whatever, we're at 50 red. Well, then it's kind of at red in general. But then when I push it over 50 in blue, then it's at 100 technically. 100%
But
full.
it's a mix, so.
It is still a mix.
So right there would be, okay,
Yeah.
it would be 2/3 blue and 1/3
Yeah,
red. Okay.
exactly. Yep.
That's all.
Yep. And obviously, yeah, we're still keeping that ratio of color in there.
Okay.
So if you want,
You can pinch that screen anytime?
yes. Well, in the channel map specifically,
Oh, okay.
yes.
You can say that.
And
You can do it anytime.
and also, I think let's just put it something dumb looking like that. There's a little magnifying glass in the corner. If you click it, it'll just auto size it to whatever fits the way you put all your channels on there. So if you only had like 3 channels on there and you press that, it's gonna zoom way in.
So by a channel map, you're actually moving the channels to the direction that they're hitting the stage? Is that what you're doing? Like, moving 40 out of sequence tells you that 40 is coming from,
This is just really for the operator's benefit. It doesn't have any effect in the real world. It's just
Right.
the organization
right,
of,
but, so you would put 40 there if you thought 40 was coming from here.
theoretically, yes.
Gotcha.
Yes. Yep, assuming that's what makes sense to the operator. Maybe they just want to have all their spots in this corner, all their watches in this corner,
Okay.
whatever works. So those presets, do they call them presets? Presets or playbacks?
Playback.
Playbacks. I keep on saying presets when I mean playbacks. That's kind of a wording that's kind of special to this console. To do that part, or why you should do that part?
I think for us, it would be, let's say you had a look that you're going back to a lot, or a look that is a base look that you want to then add things to. Instead of rebuilding that look each time, you just throw that look into a
Playback.
preset, a playback.
Yes.
And then you just bring that up and play around from there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
exactly that.
Yeah.
And I mean, to stretch this out, this is just the first row. You could put the next row on the next 3, and the third row on the next 3, or you could have all of them. In addition to that, you could have these 3 be all of them if you just want to control them all RGB mixing. at the same time. Yeah.
But I don't know why you need the playback to RGB mix when you can play with the color selector.
You definitely can. It's just a question of this particular situation is useful if you just have a group of lights that you know you're always going to be kind of RGB mixing together, and
Okay.
you like the physical ability to mix it this way instead of using that. But there's
Okay.
definitely a good benefit to being able to pick the color, and they just change to that. So yes.
Each one of these lights can be, have different characteristics. You were talking about a fill or a spot, or you show, I was just wondering if you could show the difference between them.
Well, it's not a physical thing out here, though. It's only in the board. It's a way of organizing it for yourself.
Okay, it's not like I'm not at the lighting next to a Pharrell, is that what they're called?
A Fresnel, yeah.
So they can focus to a smaller,
I mean, not automatically, right? They don't have a motor on them or anything like that.
oh, okay.
No.
But you could pick all your Fresnels and put them in a group and call it Fresnels, if that made sense to you.
I mean, a mover,
A moving light.
a
yeah.
moving light could do what you're suggesting.
Oh, they don't move, okay.
Nope.
The only thing we can play with is color.
Yes.
Anything else is manual. We hang it where we want it.
Yep.
Although they want them pretty much to stay where they are. And
We're
swing it
sort
where
of
we want.
taking baby steps in that direction, but we're not at moving lights.
That's money.
That's serious money, and it's a lot of programming, to be honest,
Yeah.
to set them up in rehearsal. But you can get patterns, spots, fuzz them out. I mean, you can do all sorts of really cool things. But yeah, they're pricey.
Yes.
Okay.
Basically, you're talking about, you're choosing color and intensity. But you're not physically moving anything, and you're not changing the beam spread, for
Okay,
instance.
they're not panning. necessarily.
We've already chosen the beam spread by the lens that are in them, that are based on the distance, the throw. We just chose what would be logical to fill the stage properly and overlap the various instruments to sort of evenly cover the stage. I mean, you can get very narrow, medium, and wide, and we chose whatever
So all the lights are the same, basically?
they are. Yes.
So,
All the
and-
new ones.
And just, so what you're saying is, we're not gonna get up on ladders and change the focus every show on these lights.
Uh,
They're the way they are.
No, you could.
These ones in particular, no. Everything else, yeah, probably.
I mean, you would still get up and refocus them if you need to, but you're not going to, like a Fresnel, adjust the beam spread. Now, if
Oh, yeah.
we
And
were able to.
you'd rather we didn't move them from the
Well,
spot.
it
because
would be
they're hard
best
to
if we
move.
didn't physically move them because of the data cable that needs to go to them and the fact that they're daisy chained together to the board, so it makes that tough.
Okay,
So that's why we're sort of overstage versus conventionals on the side and in the front, because it's tough. It may get to the point where we could have a hamper of cable and basically say, have fun, but it would take the better part of your Sunday while
yeah.
you're building.
oh yeah, but we'll be able to move them, focus them a
Oh,
little
absolutely.
bit?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
okay,
they
that's
could
all.
be backlight, they could be front light, they could be straight
Oh,
down.
oh.
But there's
Okay,
nothing
alright.
along the way back for backlight.
That's true.
Yeah,
It'd
okay.
be mainly because there weren't any hanging points back there. So there was no there.
Yeah.
So that's why those pipes are where they are, because of what the steel is above it, above the ceiling.
Right.
We're kind of stuck.
So I think we need to know how to record a cue.
Sure. Yeah. Let's move on to that.
Does anyone want to take a break?
Sure. Yeah.
Or not? I mean, if everyone's good, great.
If nobody else is
someone
coming, maybe I should lock that front door.
would like to take a little break and then chat and then start again, I don't know. I mean, it's just a thought, if somebody wants a bathroom break or the time to talk to Paul personally or something. What do you think? Little?
Do you want a break?
Fine, I'm fine.
Well, is 10 minutes okay?
Yeah. Whatever you like.
Okay.
Thank you, Ted.
All right. Are we on?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we were going to go into cues before we broke here. So just to make it easier, I'm going to bring up those little submasters that I used. And at this point, I'm liking the way the stage is looking. So I'm going to press the record button again. And this time there's not a shortcut. You can't just like press a button and go into cues. You just have to press the cue button, which is right in the front there. And in this case, it's going to pick the next whole number, cue number. So you can still do 35.5, and it might have 2 decimal points. I don't know. It might have 1 or 2. But when you do the cue, it'll just automatically pick the next whole number. But you can change all that after the fact. So, you know, I made a cue 36, but I'm like, no, I want that to be 35.5. So it's the same idea as in the patch menu. I just clicked on that little, you know, cell that's at the top of this whole cue list, and now I changed it from 36 to 35.5. So if we go, what I'm going to do, oh, and I haven't actually stored it yet. So this is just the part where you're figuring out. This is also where you can change. It defaults to a 1 second fade in and a 1 second fade out. That is something you can change in the internal settings here. If you prefer to run it 3 seconds and you don't want to be changing every single cue every time to 3 seconds and 3 seconds, then you can change that. But for instance, I'll just change this to 3 and 3. Oh, I put a 30 in that first one. That's going to be a bit too long. Yep. So now we're 3 and 3. Before I proceed off of this, you can see there's a column here for follow and there's a column here for content. So follow is going to be if you want, you know, cue. If I put a follow of 1 second on cue 35, if you press go, if you're in cue 34, you press go, you go into cue 35. After 1 second of being fully in cue 35, it will proceed onto, in this case, 35.5.
So it's what they call an auto follow in some
Yeah.
words.
Yep. Yep. And then the last column here is content. It's not super useful to you. I mean, it could be. It just tells you what kind of information is stored in that queue. So you can see a couple of the ones above here. This little flower star looking thing, colorful, is just saying that there's color or intensity data in there. You might see other, well, you're not going to see other ones because the other ones are like, you know, beam stuff, which is gobos or focus or something like that, and position, which you don't have any movers. So the only thing that you're going to see in this space is this little star thing. Otherwise, you've somehow recorded in information that does not exist. So right now, I'm happy with my cue. Oh, and also a good thing to note is naming it, because that's useful for the operator coming down the pipe. So I'm going to call it test cue. And then I'm happy with everything. I'm going to press the store button. So let me go.
And that stays red until you've recorded it.
Which part?
This was red until you
yep.
saved it.
Yeah, the red is cancel and the green is store. Most things, if you're doing something, will have an option for you to back out of if you're like, oh wait, I didn't mean to do that. So that's often red. So now, let's go over to the cue list here. And I'm just going to go, there's a more button up here, more, and it pops up and it says a few things. Flag, next flag, previous flag, and I actually haven't messed with those, but I believe that is like, maybe you can put like a delineation, maybe after, maybe right before scene 2 starts, you can put a flag, and so you can jump to these starts of scenes more easily.
Oh, okay. It's like a bookmark.
Yes, exactly. But the other two, go to 0 and go to queue. So go to 0 is just going to basically exit the queue list. It'll no longer have an active queue in the show. And then go to queue. You can pick, if you're like, I want to go to queue 34, then you're just going to press go to queue, and then it'll pop up with a little screen here. Type in 34, check, and it takes it, you know, automatically. Once you press that check mark, it is going to go into queue 34 using the timing of that queue. So I'm going to once again press the more button. Let's go to queue 0. So now we're at the top of the show. And we still have those guys on. So now, just want to make sure I actually recorded stuff right. Yep. So I was just looking to see the little star, and so that means I did indeed record some intensity information, some color information. So what I'm going to do, instead of going through this whole Q list, let's start at Q let's start at Q30. Oops. Go to Q30. So, there we go. I'm just looking at the Q list here, and I'm just going to press the Q button. So now I'm in.
Next Q.
Yep, and you'll notice it's the same kind of idea as it is in the top corner. Yellow is current Q that you're in. Red is the next Q that will be taken here. So now I'm going to press again. It went into a.
Change cues?
Here he's, yeah, that's
Yep.
a go button right
Okay.
there.
This blue guy down here has a little play arrow, and that's go to the
Right.
next Q.
Okay.
So now we're in a blackout, as is obvious. I'm going to go to the Santa meet and greet. And then, theoretically, this should be my cue. So, let's see, 3 seconds.
But this is Santa.
I lost my powers.
So yeah, it worked well for what I was doing it with. And a thing that might trip some people up is like, we're at the end of the cue list. Why are there a billion cues after this? It just wraps around. So if I press go again, now we're back at the start of the show.
Okay.
Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
And conversely, if I press the back arrow, I'm going to go back. Right now, I'm back in my queue. So just to show you again, you can see going from queue 34 into 35, it's a 1 second fade. But remember, mine I put to 3 seconds, 3 seconds up and 3 seconds down. So when I press that, it is a longer fade, as you can see here. But we do go into my queue, and that's the look that I set.
Got it.
Does that seem nice and simple?
Great.
It's not that bad, right? So I guess we can kind of mash the two last topics together and just show you how to do a playback sequence, which is, like I said, a cue list, but housed in a fader instead of in the main cue list. So let's do it this way. So I'm going to go to Q0, so we don't have anything on stage. And I'm going to bring up, I'm just going to do it this way. So we got our red. I'm going to press the record button. And I'm going to record a playback sequence, which is the third button on there. And now it's, it tries to prompt you, by the way. If you see any of these little tan lines here at the top, it's trying to tell you what should your next action be. In this case, press a bump button to record to a sequence on a playback. So these are your bump buttons, and they're where you want to record a sequence. So I'm going to pick 40. So now it brought me into kind of a special menu, and this is the one that's just kind of for recording the sequences. And you can see now our little tan thing here is edit the step parameters, a store button to proceed or cancel to abort. Seems like kind of bad English, but so in this case, now this is the first. They call it a step in this case. It's really just a cue, but they're trying to delineate the two things, which is a good idea. So our step number 1 is now red. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make step number 2 green. Actually, I didn't actually do that. So we're in red. Pick whatever look you want.
Yeah.
And then what you want to do is press, you have 2 options here. You have a blue, store and exit, or green, store and new. So store and exit means store this look, and then I'm done making this sequence. Store and new means store this look, and now move on to my second step. So now I'm going to go off with the red, on with the green, and then press it again. And all this point, you can be naming these just like a regular cue list, so you can keep track of what the heck's going on here, but I'm going to skip that for now, and then make it blue. I stored number 3,
Come all up before.
and then
This would be great for thunderstorms.
it might be, yeah.
Well, there are chase lights around something. You could have different steps for
Mhm.
every third light and have it go around.
Yeah, a marquee
or
kind of thing.
Some kind of practical, marquee light. for
Yep.
instance.
Yeah, definitely. So now I've decided this is my fourth and final step for this. And they all defaulted that 1 second. And you can see it actually auto-filled in that follow because it knows that that's how it's going to make it an auto thing. You could theoretically remove that follow and then these would just be, I guess, I don't know what would happen if you remove that follow. I don't know if it's because you're recording a playback sequence. Are they still is it just gonna follow time 0? So bam, 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 bam? Or is it just gonna not follow at all?
Don't go down that rabbit
Yeah,
hole.
just don't do that. How about that? So anyway,
So you want,
I'm done with this one. I'm gonna press the blue button this time, store and exit. So now we have a theoretically working playback sequence. Let's see if I was successful in that. Okay, it's hard to tell because of the little light here. Number 40 is actually a very dim yellow right now. So whenever one of these buttons, we got dim purple over here, they're just trying to tell you that there is something actually there so that you know it, but it's not actually on. When it's on, you'll know it's on. So same thing. So we're kind of yellow. You can see it. Oh, now we're actually yellow. As opposed to if I push up this one, nothing's happening because we don't have anything recorded here. So now it's just going to fade through my 4 cues or steps that I made in here.
I assume you could change the timing and you could have them
Yep.
actually bump from one to the next as opposed to crossfading.
I was wondering that myself because you can definitely change the timing on here. Oh, you know what? So yes, if we change the timing to 0, but leave the follow as 1, then it'll just
Yeah,
bump through it.
sure.
Yeah. So this would be that kind of scenario that I was mentioning in the beginning of like, if you have a party scene and you just want to have just manual control over that particular effect so that you can just turn it on and off at will. That'd be the kind of scenario that we might use that in. And obviously, it can look a lot more crazy than this. If you took the time to like, for my step 1, I'm going to turn on this light, this light, this light, this light, this light at 5 different colors. And then step 2 is a second different set of light at another set of different colors. It could really, go a lot crazier than this. But for the same,
So I was just curious, you were talking about presets. So let's say you found a look you really like. Maybe you're going to use that in your next play. So is it something you could save on a flash drive? And
well, I mean,
Yeah.
only insofar as saving the show, because you can't stick your flash drive in and cherry pick a certain scene or a certain preset
Okay.
playback. It's just really,
the
your
whole show.
yeah, it's the whole show.
But maybe somewhere you could write down what you did.
Yeah,
if you really wanted to.
document it somehow.
What settings you chose for
Mhm.
a certain thing.
And that's just one of those, you might not be familiar, but that's another one of the differences, the main differences between this, user-friendly one versus what would be more used in a larger theatrical space, like a lot of these people are used to, because those boards you can cherry pick. You can say, I want my patch from this show, or I want my cues from this show.
They're all stored in there.
Yes, but this one's just kind of all or nothing. So, let's see. One thing I haven't touched on, these bump buttons, I've been using them to like select, a submaster that I want to keep and use when I'm doing recording stuff. But I don't know if anybody's familiar, but well, some people are. Bump buttons are called that for a reason because you can usually use them to like bump on. I don't know if that really makes sense phonetically, but it's just a thing that they say in the industry, bumping on, the different things. So you can just have these buttons, whatever you have stored down here, you can just have it, instead of playing with the fader, if you want to be doing a party scene this way,
There you go.
you can.
Kind of rock and roll 1968.
Yeah. And with that bump, you have 0 timing. It's just on and off, and it's at full. You can change the way that the buttons behave. Below our thing that says playback 1 here in purple, there's a button that says flash. And you can change it. Right now it's in flash, but if I move it to solo, well, let me put it this way. If I turn that on, so solo basically, I don't want to use the word in a sentence, but it solos out, whatever you were trying to use here. So even though I had the blue on, it just essentially canceled the blue. It says, I'm not listening to that anymore. I'm just listening to whatever I have here. By comparison, if I switch back to flash, I put that blue on, and then I press this. It's mixing them now. It's not ignoring the blue anymore.
Could you solo something to get rid of a single light or to alter and then record the look? So you have a certain look and you want to...
It would be like a sequence.
No, never mind. It's because it deletes everything else.
Yeah, I don't think that would work for what you
Yeah.
were kind of starting to get to there.
Is that like inhibitive and, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Some of those old Century Strand boards from the 80s kind of thing.
So do changes to cues get tracked?
Say again?
Do changes to cues track through other cues?
Yeah, as opposed to
automatically?
Q only? Yeah. Yes. Well, okay. Oh, do they track? So if you changed something in an earlier queue,
Does
is it
change
going to change it for the other ones? I don't know. I would kind of think yes, just because this is a theatrical console. But we can give it a test here. We got to make.
So I know most designers work in track, but I never figured out how to do that. I like cue only.
Yeah. I mean, I think track makes a lot of sense for theatrics because you're typically not just completely erasing it. I mean, sometimes, yes, you are starting a whole new scene, but a lot of times, scene, but you're not turning off all the other lights. You're just adding in this one light for a special, or you're taking away this one light. So that's
Yeah.
makes sense. But
Let's say you built though half the show and you're now going into Act 2. And so you go, okay, I just want to use the Q4 that I used in Act 1. So go to Q4 and then record as Q28.
I think you should be able to do that. Let's give it a
Because
test.
that's often something you want to use
I agree.
the same look over again.
Yeah.
Further down, and you just say, oh, well, we'll just copy Q thus and
You
such
just,
as
just bring up
Q.
the cue and then record it again.
as
Yeah.
Just a
something,
different
yeah.
number.
That's what I'm
Yeah, right.
thinking.
Like a special function.
Yeah.
So let
That's
me. I'm just going to pick a cue here that has something in it, sure. And then I'm going to press record, cue, and I pick 36. And I'm not going to give it a name, but I'm going to press store. And now I'm now in, whenever you write a cue, it will change you into being in that queue. After that queue has been stored, you're now in Q36. So, just to make sure I have everything off, I'm going to press the clear button and press the all button. So now, if I go, okay, we're in 31. I'm going to go forward, 32, 33, 34 blackout, 35 Santa. Okay, 36 is my cue. And then, oh, sorry, 35.5 is my cue. 36 is hopefully, yes, that cue that I copied.
Just go to it and then record
Go to it.
whatever number.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yep. Record it to whatever number.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And there is a default time that I assume that when you record something, you've gone to a settings and said, my default time
Yep.
is 2, but I assume that at any time you could go record Q3 time 5. Or
Well, you could if there was a time button, but there's not.
there's not.
Yeah.
So you automatically have a default time.
Yeah.
And you're stuck with that time pretty much?
I mean, yes and no, because when you make the queue, at that point, you can, if I get rid of this right here, go back to my queue list. Oh, right, you have to, so in order to edit the queue list, that's a good thing to have too here. That same record button that we've been using is also /edit. So when you press that, the first red section is record, and the second green section is edit. So you got edit queue list and edit sequence list. So if I press the edit queue list here, it goes into this kind of blue version here, which tells you we're in editing mode here. So if I scroll over to whatever 36, then we have those same cells at the top, and you can just change to whatever the time you want is.
So you can set a time.
Okay.
Yes.
So you're not stuck with
You're not stuck indefinitely.
time 5.
It
So
will
what-
make
how
a
do you-
queue with the default time of the console, but at that point,
Right.
okay, now I want this to be,
Oh, you just press the time and change it.
yeah,
And you can, and so you have there is a default time that you can
Yes.
set. But then you can change each one. If you want a 50-second slow
Yep.
fade.
And something I just noticed while we were,
Talking about the fade.
Yeah.
You can do a,
Fade in or fade out, you
you
know.
can do a sunrise and a sunset.
Right.
Right.
I'm seeing while we're in this blue edit screen, there is actually a button at the bottom, copy queue.
Okay,
So
okay.
if I press that button here, copy queue, you know, honestly, what I did is I pressed copy queue and I pressed the green button that says next, new queue right next to it, and it made a queue, number 38, with the same timing. I might have pressed it, I might have fat fingered and pressed it twice, but,
But
and
if
there's
you
also
had-
delete queue
But
on
if
there.
that had been Q4 and you said copy Q, it would have created 38. or
Exactly,
whatever.
yeah,
Okay.
end of the list.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Half cube? Heard you say 35.5? So if you have some, you want to slide some between 35 and 36?
Yeah.
You can,
Yeah,
yep.
directors do that to you. They'll say, oh, I need
Yeah.
a light there.
Oh, I forgot we were gonna do this scene in
Yeah.
between.
So instead of renumbering everything, you just put a .5 in there.
Yep. So, I guess just to look at that, the default time a little bit, just so you guys know where it is. In that setup gear at the bottom left corner. So we were already in patch, but if we go over to settings, these are those settings I was telling you about. You're probably not gonna set them more than once per show, really. So you got a couple things on there. You can, you know, show the grid in the stage map or not. You can change the language. Operating mode. Oh, I guess we can make it simpler, but we probably shouldn't. You can put a pin on here if you wanted to lock it out and have people not be able to mess with it, but make sure you remember what it is, otherwise bad times ahead. So if we look in the times tab over here, you have your default times. So we got our clear time, default queue time, default move time, and move dark time. You're probably not going to use the last two, default move time and move dark time, because those are probably related to movers. Although it might apply to color a little bit, but
What if you come in and your show's been wiped out, there was a power surge?
well then
but
it's a
have
good thing you
your
put it on your flash drive.
Okay, so then you just put it back there and get load?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that beats putting a password because it's not like, we got several users here, right? So that probably wouldn't be fair. Better to come in with a thumb drive
Yeah.
and record your stuff periodically
Yes.
as a backup and have it in your pocket or hide it somewhere.
Definitely.
Agreed.
That's-
Agreed. Yeah.
yeah.
I guess looking into a couple other things here, there's one tab that says IND, which stands for independence. Not like independence, but like it ends with a TS, not a CES. And remind me, so you said you have those non-dims on there. Are you just turning those on manually, or how do you give power to these LEDs?
When you power the dimmer rack up,
Okay.
they're just powered.
All right.
So it's not like a relay drawer.
Oh, okay. It's just
at
on.
all. It's strictly breakers and power to these things.
Okay.
That's it.
I mean, that's the kind of situation, well, not this one, but that's what I was asking about. Sometimes the lights are just powered by a relay. And so that would be a situation where you could use these independents. It's like a quick access of like, just turn on all these and those don't get written into any queues. It's kind of like parking on some older consoles and newer consoles, honestly. But it sounds like you probably will not be using that over here. Let's just see if there's anything. You can change the backlight, the brightness of the buttons, if that messes with you in the course of a show here. There's an erase part over here. And then the last part, tags, is where you might be changing some stuff. So You know,
Those different tags.
yeah, you know, we had set some stuff to fill, and you can change that. Instead of saying fill, you could say pars. I won't
Okay.
change it, just to
Right.
leave it as, yes.
That's good.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it for the settings section that you guys would care about.
On the queue list, can you put comments in there? or-
You can name the queue, but that's the extent of comments.
Whatever.
But usually that's mostly enough for people.
What comment would you like to write?
Well, fade to black. I don't know.
Just call it that.
And so, just out of curiosity then, end of the run, you want to clear the board of your cues and everything. What do you do next?
Well, I guess in that case, it'd be one of two situations. Either we'd be clearing to just full on clear the board, or like Barry was talking about at the top of this thing, is maybe you restore it back to the default house thing. So in order to do that, back in the setup button, but now we're going to the files. So we haven't actually touched that yet. It says file handling here, and there's a couple different options. So we got new, open, save, and save as. So new would just be blank everything. So that's the answer to that question. Open,
That would, if you had a file.
so open is going to be, yeah, it can store more than one show on here. So, you know, I see at least, I don't know, 8 shows stored on here right now. Most of them are Matilda. But yeah, you could just, maybe we'll have one named standard
Rack
show.
default or something
Yeah,
like that.
default show.
Yeah.
So you just press the open button and then select that default show and then press the green check mark. I'm not going to press it right now, but that would just bring you back. Now, of course, when you do that, that might not match up anymore to whatever's up here.
Right.
So there's that kind of caveat.
Yeah, as
If
long as,
people
yeah.
refocus stuff, right.
Or even if you're not going to be moving these around, maybe all the incandescents
Yeah,
are moving
yeah.
around a lot more.
or the formatting of these instruments. too.
Sure.
So that's where we probably need to work, particularly with you guys, on what makes the most sense for a house restore
Right,
that kind of meets most people's requirements, because we aren't going to be able to, it's not going to be perfect. At the power center, invariably, there are people that bitch about, no matter what you do, somebody's going to have a complaint about what the restore is. Or to make it easier on a strike, they're going to complain. But, you know, we just have to come up with the best
Right.
solution that we can. So maybe that's something that's the next step is, you know, you think about that and we talk about it. We come up with something.
In the middle.
well, the next show that we're doing is a fairly open stage. It's on a boat. So, it would pretty much cover any kind of open stage. Because you know, you obviously don't want your default focus to be tailored to a box set necessarily, right?
Yeah.
I think in general, you'd probably want the default of whatever you're going to do here to be tailored to if there's 0 set.
Right.
Somebody's just going to
So-
walk on stage and have some kind of one-man show.
Right, yep.
So, kind of staying in this file part here, below those few options that I was talking about before, there's also a part that says Show Files, and that one you can see, if you click on it, it brings up USB import-export. So that, you know, the export is really saved to USB. It's kind of a weird way of saying it, but it is what it is. And there's a, you know what? There's a button that says Save as Default. So it's possible that you could just tell it what a default show is.
As long as nobody messes with it.
Right, as long as nobody makes us a new Save as Default.
Well, that's why you
That's why we
put
would
it on
save
a
it.
USB.
Exactly.
Yep. And you can also delete shows off of this if, you know, it's clogging up your SSD here for some reason. And advanced, you can import settings, which is probably just going to be the, you know, that settings menu. Maybe, you know, I don't know, the tags could be imported and whatnot. Export all, update firmware, might come up at some point. You would do that through the USB port. Download it from ETC's website. It's always free. All the updates will be free. And
Check that out.
Can you record things on your laptop, let's say?
Yep.
And then put it in there when you come into the field?
yeah, using that offline editor, you could record a whole dang show, assuming that you could somehow do it in a way that produced a good-looking show.
Or
Yes.
at least that was the basics so that you didn't have to do as much.
Yep, do all the patching at home.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
Set up some lights at home?
No.
No.
As long
That's
as, you
good.
know, the person who is designing this stuff knows where, or at least what numbers they want all their lights to be, it can definitely be a time-saving measure. See if there's anything else. I mean, I'll touch back on it. Layout mode is the last thing in this setup here. We already kind of looked at it, but that's just the rearrange how all your little numbers are arranged on the screen into a way that looks good for you. So at this point, I mean,
Is there a way to restore that to like sequential? Or do you have to drag it all back?
I don't think that there's a way to restore it without starting a new show.
Okay, but if you start a new show,
You'd have to repatch.
yeah.
Yeah.
okay.
Oh, okay, so unlike some ETC old boards where you'd say, restore patch 1-to-1, boom, it was just that particular thing.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the patch here, I don't think they did that kind of thing.
Boy, a 1-to-1 patch would be nice.
Yeah, but it's probably less useful now that we got these, because 1-to-1 isn't going
Right.
to be helpful for these instruments, only for these.
Exactly.
So I
Yep.
guess it's maybe kind of old school.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm even thinking about it.
And I mean, you know, that's a feature that they still have on their current boards, definitely. When they have the more room for all the more features, then yeah, they stuck it in there. But I couldn't tell you why they did or did not put it in here. I was thinking one thing to note, actually, which I haven't touched on at all here, but there is a little question mark button up in the top left corner. And that's basically, yeah, it's tutorials. So if you press it, a little tan thing comes up, press the button that you want help with. Hold help for the full help system. So, you know, it says that. I don't know where you would hold help. Oh, it's probably just hold the button. Yep. Hold that question mark. The question mark is called help. And it puts you into that blue thing again. And you're just looking at, they basically put the whole manual just on the board there. So if you forget how to do something, you can just, you know, hold down that button and either pick the button that you're trying to remember how to use, or, you know, just kind of look at it. Oh, how do I don't know, patch or something like that. And getting started with patching. And they have like little hyperlinks in there. And it's nice that they have hyperlinks that will move you to all sorts of different subjects. I'm in the patching one, but there's a hyperlink for channel. So if I press that, now it's telling me about channels. So between the YouTube videos and between ideally this training, you should be more or less able to figure stuff out. And then when you're done with the help, there's a little button down here that says, well, there's home. You can move back, looking at different stuff, or close when you're done with it.
What if you get a theater group in here that has nobody trained on that equipment? Can TLS come and help set up a?
Yeah, just
Sure,
like
for
today.
money.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean they wouldn't do it out of the kindness of their money?
Probably not.
It's funny. Our electric company just doesn't take kindness of heart for some reason. Doesn't pay the bills.
Well, I'm totally shocked at how much I learned.
Okay, is that it?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much it on my end. I've kind of exhausted, I'd say pretty much everything on this console.
Okay,
So,
because I'm almost out of battery.
okay.